Okay, good evening everyone. Welcome once again to another webinar all about dealing with anxiety in your family. This is the fourth and indeed final webinar in our course on managing anxiety presented by Meredith Rayner. Thank you for joining us once again. I hope you've had a great Tuesday and well settled, ready to participate in the webinar. Once again, a reminder that this is a live and interactive session, so we encourage you to participate to get the most out of it. The best way to do that, at least at this point, is by using the chat box, which is on the left of your screen if you're on some sort of computer or laptop, but might be a button or something like that on a mobile device or tablet, if that's how you're joining us this evening. You won't necessarily get all the features via mobile device, so we do recommend to try and get to a computer of some sort if you can. And now is probably a good time to do that while I'm just doing this little introduction. Now, before we go too much further, we've done a little welcome, but I also need to do some acknowledgements. Firstly, to the Victorian Government for funding these webinars, which is why we're able to bring them to you at no cost. And of course, anyone around Australia or indeed the world can join in, so it's wonderful to have that support. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we're meeting tonight. Of course, we're meeting in virtual land in a way, but we do all exist on land somewhere. And for those of us in Australia, we're aware that that land has traditional owners. For us here in Melbourne, that's the Wurundjeri people, and we'd like to pay our respects to their elders past and present, as well as acknowledge any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people we may have joining us tonight. Now, because this is the last session in the course, I do encourage you to get questions in early if there's anything that we haven't gotten to yet, or you've been dying to ask Meredith, or that's occurred to you over the weeks trying to do this. Don't hold back. Feel free to start asking questions right away. And of course, there'll be times where we pause throughout to try and address some of those questions. If you do feel concerned or upset by anything that we're discussing tonight, or just the process of thinking about anxiety, maybe your own anxiety, your child's anxiety, someone else's anxiety, we do encourage you to get some sort of support. The best we can do is give you some general advice. So if you are feeling like you need some more support, a good place to start can be raisingchildren.net.au. That has various links and things there that can provide avenues for further support. You can try Parenting Line or other hotlines in your state. Or you can try Lifeline if you feel like you really need some help now. By now you probably all know Meredith. She's our resident expert on anxiety and has lots of experience helping both parents, children, deal with anxiety in families. So we're very lucky to have her once again for tonight's session. Now, we've had 3 sessions already. If you haven't seen those, you can catch up on YouTube later with the recordings. Hopefully you've had a chance to do that already. We've covered an introduction to understanding anxiety. Then in the second session, talking about anxiety and beginning to manage it. Last week we did further strategies for managing anxiety. And Meredith took you through some tips and activities trying to get you to apply these techniques. And so to finish off the last session tonight, we've got why managing anxiety can be hard and what to do next. Sounds like a great way to finish off. So without further ado, Meredith, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Tony, and welcome back, everybody. It's nice to see so many people back online with us. And I do, like Tony said, encourage you to ask questions. Get some questions in early if you've got them, so that we've got plenty of time to answer them as we go. So tonight what we're going to be talking about is what makes managing anxiety difficult and how that might be impacting on how you're finding the things that we've taught over the last couple of weeks about managing anxiety. And I think you'll find that by understanding a little bit more about what makes it tricky, it's a really nice way of troubleshooting a little bit. So we thought we might start though with some home practice. So last week we asked you all to have a bit of a try at emotion coaching. We gave you some helpful sentence starters and some tips for when to have a go and what to say. So if you weren't here for last week, it'd be a good time to go back and have a listen to that recording so you can get the steps that we practiced quite a bit last week. But in the meantime, for everybody else, we're interested in two things. First, we've got a little poll, same as we did last week, which Tony is going to run us through. And then when we've done the poll, it'd be really nice if anybody's got any examples or any questions, what might have worked or what didn't work. And we might do a little bit of troubleshooting early on tonight, I think.
Sounds good. Okay. So what I'll do now is I'll start a poll within the system. It'll ask a question. If it shows up for you, you can click your response. If it doesn't, feel free to just type a response into the chat box. So I've started that now. The question is, select the best option that describes your experience with emotion coaching during the last week. You have 3 choices there. I tried emotion coaching and feel it worked well. Or you could say I tried emotion coaching and got stuck. Or finally, perhaps you didn't get a chance to try emotion coaching or you chose not to for some reason. So I'll just give you a few moments to have a think about that and respond to that poll. We've got a lot of responses in already. Like I said, if it's not working for you, feel free to just give us a comment on whether you tried emotion coaching and how it went for you. Or if you want to add any more information, we'd also be interested to hear that. So I'll stop the poll there because we've got some good responses already. If you can't see that, I'll let you know that it's quite an even spread. There's about 40% of us who tried it and found that it worked pretty well. About 30% of it tried it and found it pretty difficult. And then 30% of us haven't tried it yet.
Great. So it's terrific that lots of you are giving it a try. And if you haven't given it a try yet, sometimes that's because you forget all about it, which is fine if that happens. You'll still have learnt some things and can give it a go later on. But sometimes it's because you get into the moment where something's happening and then it's difficult for you to remember what to do. And so you kind of freeze and go back to doing what you've always done about trying to manage anxiety. If that's happening to you, don't panic. It's the first step really in dealing with anxiety is kind of noticing that you're doing it the way you've always done it and that's not quite working. So with get out the helpful sentence starters. It's great that you're here again tonight because we're going to do a little bit more practice tonight. And hopefully if you haven't had a go because you're going to freeze in the moment and not sure what to do, we'll be able to help you a little bit with that this week. So before we move on to because we'll keep the questions coming in over the course of the hour. We don't have to pop them all in now. But are there any, Tony, that we should address early on before we move on to the next comment?
Sure, we could have a question. We've got really just one so far from Wendy, who's found that her 12-year-old in high school is gotten the idea in her head of doing school online, and I guess is wondering what's going on there. There's nothing obvious in terms of things going on with the teachers. I imagine, Wendy, that you feel like perhaps anxiety is playing a part, and so Wendy's wondering if there's any sort of suggestions where to start with that kind of situation.
Where to start, yeah, sure. So, yeah, Wendy, that's really stressful if you're feeling like your daughter is quite young and is wanting to go to school online instead of attending school. My very first port of call would be the school. So I would talk to any of the teachers at the school or certainly the welfare staff. I'm one of the welfare staff at a school, so I'd be the kind of person that if you made contact you'd be able to speak to and just get some advice about what's happening. Sometimes there's an issue that can be resolved. Sometimes it's not an issue that's obvious. It's just that, that children sometimes generally feel really anxious about school, particularly if they're starting off a new school or just getting into secondary school. It's really common for kids not to be able to identify a problem, just feel like it's not the right place for them. I'd explore all those options before I'd go to doing study online, particularly at that age. I think that, which is probably why you're asking the question, I guess, is because you're a bit worried about it too. That's very young to be withdrawing from the things that school brings aside from the academic. So online courses do give you the kind of the content and the academic work required, but they don't give you any of the social interactions or any of the extracurricular activities, or even just the kind of navigating struggles and enjoying successes and making friendships and struggling with friendships, all those things that we need to learn when we're teenagers that set us up much better for adulthood. So I'd be resisting online. I certainly wouldn't be going into online as a simple option. I would be doing lots to explore other options as well, and just getting in touch with the school first and asking for some help and seeing what you can find out there. And if you're really not getting much from the school and you're still quite worried, it'd be a great idea to have a chat to a GP, maybe even have a chat to a psychologist. It's not a big deal to go along even just for one appointment and see, explore whether that could be, there could be something going on there that's getting in the way before you launch at that age into online school as an option. Great.
Okay. Shall we move on?
Shall we move on? Yeah, let's do that.
Sure.
Okay, so...
Folks, sorry to interrupt, Meredith. Just to let you know, I'm going to take us off the video for the moment, so you won't see us for a little while, but we'll come back later on. So don't panic, the system hasn't crashed. We'll still be here, and you'll be able to hear us and interact with us.
Great, thanks, Tony. Okay. So we're going to discuss a little bit now what some of the reasons are why we can find emotion coaching really difficult. So what are some of the things that get in the way and make it hard? And one of the things that some of you might be finding is that the very first initial step of identifying that there's an emotion or knowing what's going on, picking out emotionally what's going on. And even we did discuss a little bit last week, some people finding that it's really common to find that kids go from kind of 0 to 8 quite quickly. If we think about that Richter scale we're talking about, where 10 is really intense emotions where you've totally lost it, and 1 and 2 is kind of lower level, feeling a bit of discomfort. With emotion coaching, if you remember, we need to get in nice and early. So we emotion coach at kind of, between 0 and 5 or 6 or so on the scale. By the time we get to 9 and 10, it's really quite difficult. All we're doing there is helping them to calm down. So how do we do that? How do we notice early on what might be going on? And here's a little exercise I thought we might do together that can help us with that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to throw up some child situations for you, and what I'd like you to do is think about the adult situation that might be similar and the emotion that's involved. So what we're doing is trying to step into our child's shoes, or the shoes of the children that we have around us, or in fact adults. Works quite well for adults too. Try and understand it a little bit, and that can help us identify emotion earlier and also pick which emotion might be accurate. And you'll just notice we've put at the top of all the slides here, all feelings are okay, but not all behaviours are okay. So that's just kind of a little prompt to remind you that there's nothing wrong with the emotion that might be going on here. It's what we do about the emotion that makes a difference. So, it's okay to be angry. It's not okay to hit someone. Or it's okay to be worried. It's not okay to stay home in your bedroom all day, every day because you're worried. You can be worried and still do something constructive with your life. So we put that little prompt at the top just so that we keep that in our mind. So the first scenario is, and Tony, we'll get them to pop some answers maybe into the chat box as we go along if we can. So the child situation is not being invited to a party. So sure, there's many of you have come across this situation where your child comes home from school or from a group and there's a party on and they're not invited. So in order to think about what they might be feeling when this is going on before they really lose it, is think about an adult situation that might be similar. So what might be an adult situation that's the same as not being invited to a party? And with that situation, what might you feel if that was you? We'll just give people a moment here.
Sure. So folks, we're going to pause for a moment for you to have a chance to type in some responses to this little activity. So can you try and give your perspective on that situation? remember, there's not really a right or wrong answer to this. It's just sort of your perspective. Is that fair to say, Meredith?
Yeah, that's fair to say. So, this is a little bit of a tricky one to start off with. It could be that the situation is the same. You know, if you're an adult and one of your friends, you know, has a function going, or you know, decides to go somewhere and invites quite a few people, and you're not one of them, that might be a similar situation to a child not being invited to a party. And so, what might be the emotion? What might you feel if your friends organise something and don't invite you, or you find out later and you've been left out? What might you feel?
So we've got some comments coming in so far, Meredith. We've got Nicole's example of being excluded from an invitation to go out to dinner.
Yep.
And she said that she would feel rejected or left out. Di shared that she would feel unliked in that situation. Susan explained that it could be the same situation for an adult not being invited to a party. Kate suggested that she would feel disappointed, perhaps. Other examples of feelings include rejected, jealous, confusion, disappointment, people not wanting you there.
Right. Yep, not good enough. That's, really well done, guys. That's inadequate. Well done, Michelle. Yeah, that's right. So even I can see from what you're thinking there, some of those emotions are quite intense, aren't they? You know, we might think, oh, not being invited to a party for a child, oh, well, you know, we're busy anyway and got other things to do and it's easy for us. But when we stand in their shoes, think about what that would be like for us if somebody invited us, you know, a whole lot of people out for dinner and we weren't included. You can really feel not good enough or inadequate, or, you know, really disappointed and left out. So you can see how, so you could emotion coach that. So you could use that in a sentence and say to your child, you know, I think I understand you feel really left out or really upset. And if you're able to think about the adult situation that's similar, that can help you to be a bit more empathic or understanding when you are responding to your child. Here's another one, starting school. So what might be a similar adult situation to starting school?
Okay, folks, share with us your sort of parallel situation.
Yep, starting a new job and feeling nervous, or having an interview for a new job, moving house. That's great. And I think interesting one to think about this one is I feel the same. I think starting a new job or having an interview for a new job, or going back to uni as maturation, they're really great suggestions. But if you think about it, especially if you've got quite young children, starting school is the first time they've done anything like this. Even when we start a new job or go to uni, we've at least had experience of starting primary school and starting secondary school, so we've built up a little bit of understanding of what that's about. So although it's a good similar example, and it's the closest I could come to it too when I was thinking about it, it's still not as kind of big and daunting as starting school could be. And yeah, I think that's right. They're scared of the unknown and nervous, a bit overwhelmed. They're terrific. That would give you some good words that you could use when you were starting out talking to your child about this, or emotion coaching your child. How about this one? Lots of us have done this, being told to eat something you don't like. So when your child tells you that they are not eating vegetables anymore because they don't like them, and you say that they need to have them and they're not leaving the table till they're finished, what might the emotion be? What might be a similar adult situation? And what might the emotion be? Yep, so we've got, you know, that's right, doing a task at work that you don't like, and that would be resentful, or the boss telling you to do something you don't want to do, having to try new food at a restaurant. Yep, they're all really good ideas. Having to try new food at a restaurant. Yep, they're all really good ideas. And how might you feel? So resentful is one good example. And what else might you feel? Frustrated, yep, or angry. Yep, they're really good examples. And I think This is a nice one to remind you, the little caption at the top, the feelings are okay, but the behaviours are okay. Because our child is angry or resentful that we're asking them to eat their vegetables, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't eat them. Okay, so what we can do if we need them to eat their vegetables is to say to them, emotion coach them through it if you can do that. Say something like, I know it's really annoying when I ask you to do this. I can tell that you're really angry with me or frustrated with me because I'm asking you to eat your vegetables. In the pause. But you need to eat them. You can't just eat meat. Or, vegetables are good for you and they're healthy, and I need you to eat some of your vegetables. So keep in mind that emotion coaching doesn't mean that because they're feeling an emotion that is difficult for them to manage, that you should just let them do whatever they want to do to avoid that emotion. What we're doing here again is saying to them, I understand how you feel, and genuinely being empathic and understanding how they're feeling, but this is what you need to do. So you can feel this way and you can still do what I need you to do. We've got here, the youngest sibling is wearing your clothes without your permission. So what might be a similar adult situation to younger sibling wearing your clothes? This is one that I have experienced quite a bit. I've got girls at home, so I know this scenario quite well.
Let us know what you think, folks. It's a fun activity, this one. You kind of have to use your brain and do some lateral thinking about what the possibilities are.
I think that's true, Tony, and it's quite easy with some of these to just think, oh, like, what's the big deal? That, like, so she's got your t-shirt on, like, just go and choose another one out of your cupboard. And that's okay some of the time, but it can be dismissive. So if we're emotion coaching, what we're doing is noticing what they're feeling. So try and stand in their shoes and notice what they're feeling. And then after we've done that, then helping them to still make the right decision or do the right choice. These are great. Can you see some of these coming through? So we've got your people eating your lunch out of the work fridge. Oh, that is really annoying, and makes you very angry. That's a great one. Or your spouse buying something without discussion. Children taking your phone without asking. Husband using your headphones. That's exactly right. So you're losing control of your possessions. So you'd feel disrespected. Is that a word? I think that's a word, and I think it's a feeling. You can feel disrespected. With children, you'll probably see this as looking like anger when it comes. So kids, if this happens, your child will look angry. If they're really angry and it's happened quite a lot, they're likely to act out. Oh, your sister feeding your son chocolate without asking. Thank you, Natasha. That sounds like a personal experience. Okay, great. So your child can, in this case, your child can be angry about the fact that their younger sibling is wearing clothes without permission, or disappointed, but they can't. They're not allowed to hit, or they're not allowed to yell, or so the behaviour. You need to put some boundaries on the behaviour, but you can still understand that they're angry about what's happened. Being called ugly by a sibling. What's a similar adult situation to that?
Another chance to put your thinking caps on, folks. Called ugly by a sibling. You might be unlucky and be told that as an adult, perhaps, depending on what sort of sibling you've got. I wonder if you can think of some other situations that might be similar or evoke a similar emotion.
Put down from a partner, that's right, or being told you're fat by another adult. Criticism by a work colleague, that's right. So you'd feel rejected and you'd feel inadequate. Yeah. If you're younger, you probably get pretty angry. You might be embarrassed is another emotion you might be feeling. It's pretty horrible to be called ugly or fat. And so it's easy for us as adults, pardon me, to think, oh, well, just don't listen to them. You know, tell the sibling off, forget about it, don't listen to them. And that's fine 70% of the time. Remember, we only need to emotion coach about 30% of the time. But if your child is getting quite upset about it, or if you think about it, it's a nice opportunity to emotion coach. So you could say something like, you know, I guess I can understand that you'd be really embarrassed and angry because you've been called ugly. And then you put the pause in and say, but you know, you don't need to listen to them. They're just being mean or something like that, and discipline the other child. Right, we've just got a couple more. This is an interesting one. Not wanting to receive an academic award in front of your school friends. So I've had this one come up quite recently as an interesting scenario for emotion coaching. So this is an example of something that, as parents, we're often really excited and proud that our child's going to receive an academic award, but of course our children don't always feel the same way about it. So can you think of a similar scenario where you might feel similar to not wanting to receive an academic award in front of your school friends? Not wanting to feel like a favourite in the workplace, that's great. Not wanting to give a presentation or do some public speaking. Terrific. Oh, and Danielle's given us an example here where she saw it a few weeks ago at a school assembly where a child refused to get up and accept the award. That's right. And if we're not aware of how we're feeling about that emotionally, or not able to step into our child's shoes and try and take their perspective a little bit, we could get really angry. And I've seen this happen when you get really angry and frustrated with your child because you want them to go up and receive the award. But of course you can feel really embarrassed or humiliated about it. Lots of people don't like to be made the centre of attention that way. And I actually had a recent experience of where I was able to help an adult to understand this, where a child, the school that I work at has a really big boarding community, and one of the children in the boarding house was keeping their room really tidy. So the head of house took a photo of his room and put it up for all the other boys to look at. Of course, that's not an ideal way to endear that child to a whole lot of other kids. So as an example of where an adult can feel like it's a great thing, but the child might not feel it themselves. And the last one, being told to share your new favourite toy. So can you think of a similar adult situation to being told by someone that you have to share your brand new Harry Potter Lego or whatever it is you've just got? Yeah, Becky, that's the one I thought of first up too. Letting someone drive your new car. Imagine if someone told you that you had to let someone drive your brand new car. Husband wants to go in a new beanbag. Yep, that's a good one too. Or using a gift card that was a present given to you for groceries. Yeah, or being expected to share the credit that you did the work for. That's right. Now, when you think about it from an adult perspective like that, you know, if somebody said that, like, you came home one day and your husband or your wife had given the car keys over to his brother to drive your new car and just said, oh, well, you know, I thought you wouldn't mind it, so he needed it, so it's nice to share, so you're just sharing. Or you come home and your husband's in your brand new beanbag or something like that. You can see how you would be feeling really disappointed and probably frustrated, pretty angry, probably hurt that your feelings have been ignored. So when you ask your child to share their favourite toy, it's good to understand what emotion that might generate in your child. Does that mean that you should not ever make them share their toy? It doesn't. No, you're still the parent in the house and you can make the decision. And if you feel like there's a reason why that child needs to share that toy, then that's your decision to make. I would just suggest that you emotion coach it first. So you could say something like to your child, I know that you're really angry and frustrated that I'm making you share that toy, But I've told you before, if you're going to bring your favourite toy out when your friend is over, then you're going to have to share it. You can't bring the toy out and just play with it by yourself. You either put the toy away or you share it with your friend. So you might have made that rule at home and your child might continue to bring that toy out. That might be a situation where you emotion coach. So you'd be saying, I can understand how you feel, pause, but you still need to do this behaviour because this is a rule in our house. Okay, great. So you guys did a really great job of that. And hopefully that's helped you. And I find this really helpful activity as a parent, but also as a psychologist when I'm working with clients, to really try and stand in their shoes and try and understand how they're feeling before I move forward and work on how to manage that emotion or how to change that behaviour. And I find thinking about what a similar scenario might be is really helpful. Great. Okay, so we've got another poll here. Now we talked about this a little bit last week, so I just wanted to make sure that you were aware and had in the front of your mind when to emotion coach. Sometimes when you're learning a new skill, you are really eager and you burst into trying to apply it in every situation. So this is just a bit of a poll to check that we understand this. So would you like to put it up when you're ready, Tony?
So correct me if I'm wrong, Meredith, but I believe we're going to go through a range of different situations.
We are.
And you're going to tell us yes, no.
Yes.
Basically, from the multiple choice that will come up on your screen, would you emotion coach in that situation? Is it likely to be effective or is it a good idea?
Yeah. Great.
All right. So the first one is, you pick up your child from school and they seem quieter on the drive home.
Right.
Do you reckon you would emotion coach in that situation, or do you think it's best not to? We'll check what Meredith would recommend in a minute, or explore some of the possibilities there, considerations. Give you a few more moments to get some more ideas in, but don't be afraid to have a go at this stage. This is our last session, so it's better to have a guess now and get it wrong. You're more likely to remember it that way in the future. So don't be too hesitant to put your ideas out there. All right, we'll stop that one there. It looks like it's quite an even split on this one, Meredith. Just a slight majority saying that yes, they would emotion.
Yeah, and I agree with them in most situations. Now there might be a reason why you wouldn't, but generally, if you are driving quietly home from school and you notice that your child's a bit quieter, it's a nice calm situation. You're not exactly sure what's wrong, but you think there might be something wrong because they're quiet. You could emotion coach them. So you could say something along the lines of, so quiet is not an emotion. So what you would do is do a little bit of perspective taking, like we just talked about before. Think about what your child might be feeling and have a go at putting it in a sentence. So you might say something like, you look a bit sad, or you seem a bit worried about something, or whatever emotion you might think is happening, I'd put that in a sentence. Now they might come back with, no, I'm not sad at all, I'm just tired, I've just had a busy day. And that's fine if that's what they say. You've still emotion coached and shown your child that you're interested in how they're feeling. But if it's nice and calm and you're just driving home, that could be a good time. They might come out with something like, yeah, I've actually had a really bad day because, and then they let you know what's happened. So that would be a good chance to emotion coach. Of course, it wouldn't be if you were rushing off to swimming or about to drop them somewhere and not able to talk to them. If you are driving your child home from school but you've actually only got them kind of in the car with you for a minute, then that wouldn't be a good time. Okay, so next one.
All right, next situation, folks. It's the same idea, but this situation is, you come home to a kitchen littered with empty food containers and your teenager has eaten the food you planned for dinner. Now, you might have to imagine this one if you don't have a teenager, but it's still a good exercise to go through. So get your responses in, folks. Give you a few more moments to have a go at this one. get some practice in while we've got the chance. All right, we've got some pretty good responses so far. It looks like the winner in terms of the popular opinion is no.
And I would go with no. If that was me, if I was that parent, I would go with no. And the reason is because I would be pretty angry. If I'd been at work and I've come home and the kitchen is trashed and all the food that I have organised for dinner is gone, I would be pretty angry myself. And so emotion coaching would be a good thing to do then. What I would probably just do is tell my child off. Or I'd say, I'm really angry and I don't want to talk to you about it right now, and I come back and talk to them later. If you're a pretty calm person and you come home and you've had a really great day and you're not stressed and worried when you see, or angry when you notice that, then yes, you'd be right, you could emotion coach. But if you were feeling pretty angry about it, which I think I'd be feeling, then the answer would be no. So you don't emotion coach when you're at quite a strong emotion level yourself, because you're just not able to do it effectively. You wait until you're feeling a bit calmer and then you have a go.
Joanne had an interesting observation,
Yep.
which is that as a parent, you might be the one needing emotion coaching
Spot
in that
on.
situation.
That's right. So if you've got a friend or a partner who you've taught how to emotion coach, I would be getting them on the phone and getting them to do it.
We might keep it moving, folks. Yep. We'll do the next situation and see what you think. And that is, your child says their best friend is ignoring them. Would you emotion coach or not in that situation? And of course, remember, if the polls aren't working for you, if you're on a mobile or something, do feel free to type yes or no into the chat, and you can participate that way. People are pretty quick onto this one, Meredith.
Yep.
Everyone so far has said your child says their best friend is ignoring them.
Yeah, so that could be a good thing to emotion coach, a good time to emotion coach. And the reason I put that example is because I think that's one of the ones that's a little bit at the heart of, the struggle that we have when we're emotion coaching worry or anxiety, because it's really difficult. So I think I would say, yes, I would emotion coach it, and something along the lines of, standing in their shoes like we just did on those activities. How would I feel if my best friend was ignoring me? I'd be really sad and feel really left out, and I'd put that in a sentence. I must feel really sad about that. That's really sad to hear. Yep. Great.
Right. Everyone's very on the ball tonight. Yep. Thank you so much for your participation, by the way, everyone. I think this is about the best group we've seen in a few years of doing these webinars in terms of being onto these activities. So good on you. The next situation is a teenager doesn't want to go to bed and there is a maths test tomorrow. Do you emotion coach in that situation? Got lots of responses coming in. Looks like yes is winning so far, although we definitely have some no's as well. In fact, it's evening out a bit. Give you a couple more moments. Most people have answered so far. All right, we might stop that one there. It is a pretty big majority saying yes.
Yeah, and the reason we've got this example is because this one's a little bit tricky to decide too. This is a bit of a, it depends. But I think majority of yes would be most correct. So if your teenager doesn't want to go to bed and there's a maths test tomorrow, that could be a good time to emotion coach, because you do know what the emotion most likely is. Most likely they're worried about the maths test. You could emotion coach a little bit, which would be along the lines of, I'm wondering if you're really worried about that maths test tomorrow. It's scary when there's a test. I'd be worried about that too. But you need to go to bed, because if you haven't had any sleep, it's going to be harder for you to study. So you're putting the emotion in first, and then you're saying you still need to go to bed. So the way to think about this one, or the reason I put this in, is to think, if you don't emotion coach, you could see how just getting a bit cross with your child because they won't go to bed and growling a few times and getting frustrated with them is going to ramp the emotion up more. So a length of time it could take for your child or teenager to get into bed and actually get to sleep could take longer if you don't emotion coach. than it could if you do. So hoping you could see that. But no, I don't think that's 100% wrong, because there is a limit, and there does come a point where if you spent too long on this and now it's even later and it feels like a bit of a stalling tactic, then I'd cut it off short. So you're not 100% wrong if you said no.
All right. Should we do a couple more of these, Meredith, or do we need to move on?
I think we might. Those last two are quite similar, so I think we might move on if that's all right.
Sure thing.
Okay with that one? We do have the last two in the handout, so when you get them this week, you'll be able to see what we've got. Okay. So thanks for that. It is great, as Tony said, to get so much input and information from you guys. It's nice to see you participating so well. I guess just really briefly, I just wanted to remind you, for those of you who are finding emotion coaching quite difficult, just a reminder that I think that anxiety or worry is the hardest emotion for parents to manage. And I touched on this briefly in the first week, but I just wanted to remind you now that, most of us can deal with children when they're angry. It's annoying and it's, a bit of a challenge. It's the same when they're sad. But when they're worried about something, our reflex reaction is that we want to fix it for them. So when a child comes home from school and says something like I'm really worried that I haven't got any friends, and I really worry that I'm just not happy at school, the first thing you want to do is go down to the school and sort that out. And it's really difficult for us to get the balance between letting our child know that it's okay to be worried, there's nothing wrong with that, and that then you're happy to help them to problem solve or help to sort it out. It's really important to get that first message across, that it's okay to be a bit worried about things. If you jump into problem solving too quickly when we're dealing with anxiety or worry, there's a danger that the message the child gets is you shouldn't be worried, it's not okay, it's a bad emotion to be feeling, we've got to get rid of it really quickly so that the world feels better. So just keep that in mind if you're finding emotion coaching a little bit difficult with worry. And just a couple of common things. Most of these we've touched on over the course of the program in little bits, but I thought it would be helpful to pull them together for you so you get a good sense of why it's difficult, and that you're able to give you some reinforcement to hang in there. What do we want to do when our child worries? We want to jump in and fix it, as I just said, and we've just got to watch that balance between the message that we're giving. It's also really important to be aware of your own response to emotions, and some of you will have noticed by now that we do think about that a little bit, what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks, as well as talking about your child. We've talked quite a bit about you. So if you find it really difficult when you're worried, or if you feel like worry is not okay and really bad, and if you feel disappointed with yourself or angry or frustrated with yourself when you get worried about something, if you tell yourself you're silly and try and just pretend that you're not worried about something, all those responses are going to come out in how you what you're teaching your child about worry and other strong emotions. So we really want to focus on teaching our children that the emotions are okay. You can still function if you're able to accept how you're feeling and deal with that when it's at a lower intensity. So the pause is critical, and the pause is what stops us from problem solving. And that's probably the bit that most of us find difficult, is that just be quiet and count to 5. But it is, as I said last week, it is sometimes where the magic happens, when the child really understands that you're trying to understand their emotion first, more than just dealing with the behaviour all the time. And we just talked about when not to do it. So just a summary of that little important message is, you only have to emotion coach 30% of the time, and don't do it when you're feeling really angry or frustrated or have a really strong emotion yourself, or when you're in a hurry. Okay, so what to do if those strategies aren't working? So given that worry is a really difficult emotion for us to learn to manage, and gets all caught up in how we feel about it and what we've learned about it as we've been growing up and how we experience emotion, it's really common for people to need to get a bit of help, extra bit of help with anxiety or worry. And so if that's the case, it's a really good idea to go along to a good place to start is if that's the case, it's a really good idea to go along to a good place to start is your GP. They can refer you to a local psychologist, someone hopefully who's experienced in working with children or families or anxiety or grief or whatever the emotion is that you need some help with. Teachers and people at schools are really good places to start as well. They have, in lots of cases, schools have access to some really good resources, and there's quite a few welfare and psychologists that work at schools too, so that can be helpful. Another thing that people often overlook is someone you know and admire. So if you know someone in your life who you think is doing a pretty good job at this, it's really okay to ask them for some advice. And lots of parents tell me that they find it really helpful when they talk to someone who they know really well. The other thing I guess I want to challenge you on or have you think about a little bit in terms of managing anxiety in your family is, like, what do you do for yourself? So what we know now that looking after yourself or spending some time thinking about yourself is a really important part of being able to manage these emotions well in yourself and in your family. And so often you'll find if things are just not going well and you're feeling overwhelmed, these are some of the things that have disappeared out of your life. So it's a really important part of looking after yourself is to do something for yourself every day. Now, it doesn't have to be something huge. It's great if you can do something, quite, a big period of meditation or go for a run or do something that takes a fair bit of time. But it can be really simple, like going for a walk, playing a game with one of your kids, even just reading a book or sitting and listening to music for a few minutes. Do some cooking if that's what you enjoy doing, not if you hate it, of course, or gardening, just even sitting in the sun or just stopping for a moment and looking out the window. The point is to do something and stop for a minute and just think about something that's important to you and that makes you happy. It can be really helpful. And a way that you can think about self-care, another way to think about self-care, which lots of people find really helpful, is to treat yourself like your own best friend. And so what this involves is thinking about, if you have, if there's somebody in your life who's really struggling or finding things really difficult, what kind of things are you likely to say to them? And what kind of things you're usually likely to say is, is there anything I can do to help? Gee, that's really tricky. If you're going through a difficult time, you need to look after yourself, get some rest, be kind to yourself. We would usually say that to somebody else. But what we notice in ourselves is that when we're struggling with something, we don't talk like that to ourselves. We tend to be pretty rough on ourselves and say things like, well, you should be able to manage better and everybody else can do this okay, and what's wrong with you? You're not managing this well, or you're hopeless, or you're useless, those kind of things. So it's really interesting to notice that as adults, we're much harder on ourselves than we are on other people. And I'll often ask people, if you spoke to other people the way you speak to yourself, how long do you reckon you'd be friends for? And people are usually pretty quick to notice that if they were being as mean to somebody else as they were being to themselves inside their head, that they wouldn't be friends for very long. And so I'd really encourage you to think about yourself as your own best friend and think about what kind of things can you do to talk to yourself or be kind to yourself the way you would be to somebody else who was struggling. Great. So we've got, that's really the end of what we're going to cover for tonight, Tony, apart from, I guess we've got what to do next slide, but
we could bring that up while we start addressing questions.
Think about some questions. Okay.
So you can have a look at that on the screen. If you have any questions about that, let us know. But we had a few questions coming in throughout the session, which I've been digging through to make sure we try and cover as many of those as we can.
Great.
So we might start off with one from Natasha early on in the session. Her 4-year-old daughter is struggling with separation anxiety, it sounds like, around dropping off at kinder time. She's got ASD, perhaps complicating things. Any suggestions about what you can say to reassure her, or perhaps messages that you think might be important for her daughter?
Oh, great. Okay, yeah, Natasha. And ASD would be making it a little bit more difficult. I think kids who've got ASD, they will learn how to manage their emotions, but it just takes a little bit more time and a little bit more practice and a bit more reinforcement to do it. The first thing I think about is she okay at kinder? And it sounds like you're saying she settles once you've gone. So firstly, I'd rule out, is there a problem or something not working at kinder? And then I think what I do is I just slip some emotion coaching in before you are problem solving. So when you're saying to her there, it'll be okay, I'll come back and pick you up, that's problem solving. You're kind of fixing it or giving her an answer. I would encourage you to emotion coach with her first. So you could say something like, you know, you're really sad that I'm dropping you off at kinder. If you think sad is the correct emotion, or worried if you think it's worried. You know, I can understand that you're worried about that. And I just say it really slowly, put some pauses in, and then you could say, but you know that I will pick you up. I'll be back to get you. And just I'd keep coming back to yeah, it's sad. I get a bit sad too when I leave you. But I know that I'll come back and see you at the end of the day, and I know you're going to have fun. So your responses are great. I just slip an emotion coaching sentence in first.
Great.
Okay.
We had a question from Karen about her son. He's 11, tends to get frustrated, which comes out as anger. Mm-hmm. Perhaps there's anxiety in there too. I'm not sure, Karen. Basically, it's causing some issues around school and socially. She's tried emotion coaching, but feels like she maybe hasn't got the hang of it so far. Do you think it's just a matter of practice, or is there anything else she should consider?
I think it's practice. So, Tony, how old was he?
11.
11. Okay, yeah. So, starting at secondary school, I think I would keep emotion coaching, and kind of acknowledging how he's feeling, particularly if you can get in there and notice or acknowledge it a little bit earlier. But I'd also have a chat to the school and just see whether there's any issues going on at school that you need to be aware of, and just make sure that they're aware of it too, because they can be watching out for what works at school. And even kids who say they hate school all day and everything's terrible, I know they tell you that as parents, but we see at school that there are bits, just like there are in everyday life, where there's bits that they really like. The teachers can get in and notice that and reinforce that, and even let you know when that's happening, so that you can say, I know you really you're not enjoying school and you're frustrated, and put your forward and say, but you know, remember that this went well yesterday, so something might go well tomorrow. I'd get into contact with the school and get some help from them as well.
Okay. Hope that was useful, Karen. Yeah. We had a question from Becky, also kind of relating to an anger response, when her son seems to get frustrated, sad or angry. But the particularly tricky thing for Becky is that while she's emotion coaching, his response is to explain that he feels like Becky has done something to make him frustrated or angry.
Right.
But she's quite confident that that hasn't happened. So is there a way you can deal with a child maybe having a sort of an inaccurate perception of the situation?
Yeah, I think, and it's really common, particularly in younger children, so primary school age children, for this to happen, although it does happen in teenagers as well, to be honest. So I think, and sometimes they get themselves caught up in the fact that you won't let them do what they want them to do, and that's what's making them angry. And I think that if that's the case, then what I would be saying is I would just keep emotion coaching. So I'd say, I know you're really angry, but you have to get off the computer now, it's time for dinner. Or I can understand you're really angry with me about that, but I need you to go and get ready for bed now because it's, you know, time for bed. So we can't expect our children to be happy with us because we're telling them to do something they don't want to do, but they can be angry and still have to do it. Does that make sense? So they don't have to be happy with something, and they're not going to be with everything that we ask them. So he might say you're making him angry, and you might be, you might not be, but you might be. That's okay though. You can say, I understand that you're angry. That's still emotion coaching. I get that. But I still need you to do what I'm asking you to do. And just on that, just in case this is also happening, Becky, remember we said a couple of weeks ago, I gave the example of, what was it? Oh, tired. I think was the example I gave where I said, you know, sometimes when your child, particularly when they're very young, you know, when it's 11 o'clock at night and they've been out for dinner and they're kind of hyper and they're telling you they're not tired, and you know that they're tired because it's 11 o'clock and they've, you know, been out and had a great, and so it doesn't really matter how often they tell you they're not tired, you know that they are, so you persist with that quietly and just get them into bed. This is a little bit similar in emotion coaching. Just because they tell you that they're not feeling the strong emotion doesn't necessarily mean it's correct. You don't have to get into an argument about it. You just have to just keep confident to have said it and know that and just stay calm. And over time, as they get practice themselves, because they're new to this too, they'll get better at being able to identify it themselves.
Okay, Becky's just added in another comment that
Sure.
it's also tricky for her, given that it's kind of like this accusation as part of it, and that makes her feel guilty.
Oh, yes, that's
just
true.
Take that as a comment. And
yeah, no, I think, well, and thanks for bringing it up, Becky, because underneath all of this, I mean, I know I've said that that worry is a really difficult emotion to deal with, but parenting is really hard. And children, we don't want to make our children upset, and we'd actually love it if they were happy with us all of the time, and it does push our buttons. And so, Becky, I think it's really good that you're aware of that and you're noticing that you feel really guilty about that. What I'd be keeping in mind is you can feel guilty and you can still apply the rule. So a little bit like we were saying about children, they can be angry with you and they can still not hit, or they can be worried about something and they can still you can be worried about giving a speech and you can still get up and do it. You can feel guilty and that's really normal, but you can still apply the rule. And you can still get your children to do the thing that you're asking them to do. Sometimes we are going to make them sad and that's hard as a parent, but it's really good that you're aware of that. I wouldn't let it stop you from doing what you feel is the correct or the thing that is safe and healthy for your child to do, like handing their mobile phone in if they're spending too much time on the phone.
All right, so now, folks, we might just do one more. We are pretty much out of time. I know people will need to start going, so stick around if you can for one more question. If you do have to go early, it will be great if we can get your feedback, as we always like to do. If you're on a browser, you can do that by clicking the little red X in the top right of your screen, not closing the whole browser. If you click the little red X in a circle and click Leave Webinar, it should open the survey in your browser for you. Of course, that's entirely optional. It's just helping us out to understand how we're doing. Last question. I know there are some we didn't get to, and I'm sorry about that, folks. It's the time thing. Victor had a great question about his child starting school next year, and there's an issue around kind of safety to do with anaphylaxis. And his child's a bit scared about, you know, what if something happens, which is also obviously very concerning for Victor. Any comments on how to reassure in that kind of situation where there is a safety risk to be concerned about?
Yeah, look, that's a really good point to raise, Victor, and I think the first thing I would encourage you to think about is it okay for you to be terrified of your child going to school with anaphylaxis? And I would say yes. Like, it's a scary thing. It's really scary to send a child along to school with anaphylaxis. Any of us as parents had an anaphylactic young child would be scared sending the child to school. It's normal. So it's okay. Will it stop you from sending your child to school? No. Would you like to keep them home and protect them forever at home? Yes, you would, and that's normal to feel like that too. But this is another example where you can acknowledge how you're feeling and you can do some things to help yourself make sure that you feel as comfortable as possible, but you are going to be nervous about sending your child to school, and that's okay. And similarly with your child too, I think this is a really good case where I would start even soon. When you are aware that they're feeling a bit worried, I would jump in and say, I can see that you're worried about going to school. but we're going to make sure that everything's in place so that the school, know what to do, and they have other kids there with anaphylaxis, and so you're going to give the reassurance and the confidence to your child in a factual way, but please emotion coach first. Because if your child is looking like they're really worried about going to school with anaphylaxis and you jump straight into, oh, it'll be fine, don't worry, the school have lots of other kids and they know how to manage it, what you're saying to your child is you shouldn't be worried about that. It's actually fine. And it's not fine, and they should be worried. You're worried and you're managing it and you're going to manage it. They need to learn to do the same thing too. So it's really important that you put an emotion coaching little sentence in before you give all the very factual and truthful reasons why the school is well placed to manage it. And then I would make sure the school are well placed to manage it, Victor. Like I would be checking, and schools are well trained, but if it was my child, I'd be making sure that they know what to do.
Okay, folks, I'll bring us back on the screen for a moment just so you can see us again. We can say goodbye properly. It's been wonderful over the past 4 weeks to have the chance to bring this content to you. I hope you've gotten something useful out of it. Just a reminder that this is our last session again, so don't, if you don't get an email about the next session, that's probably why. Of course, I've just shared a link. You can sign up to our mailing list for our other webinars that will be happening in the future. And it's quite likely we'll run more on anxiety and related topics in the future. I'd like to say thanks to Meredith once again. It's been wonderful having you and working with you across these sessions. And I'd like to say thanks to all of you for participating. I know it is a real ask to participate in an hour-long webinar on your Tuesday night when you're probably tired and you are pretty tempted to maybe watch something on TV just for entertainment instead. You've invested quite a lot of effort, and that's already a great start in trying to support your family around anxiety. So good on you, and you've been a wonderful audience in terms of participating. Like I said before, I really meant that you've been great at participating in these activities. We don't always get such a great response rate. So thank you once again. Of course, if you are concerned or upset and feel like you need further support, please do seek that out. So that's all from me. And it's good night. And thank you once again.